Listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of episode 2 of season 5 of Colombo, A Case of Immunity. First broadcast on the 12th of October 1975 on NBC. This episode was written by Colombo newcomer Lew Shaw, based on a story by James Menzies, also new to Colombo. Shaw was a writer and producer who worked in television for over 30 years, writing for such shows as Wagon Train, Quincy M.E. and fellow Colombo wheel show MacLeod. One of his last writing jobs was on the 1985 Joe Pesci vehicle, Half Nelson, which he wrote and co-created with Glenn A. Larson. Menzies was also a prolific television writer, working on such shows as It's a Man's World, The Fugitive, The Virginian and Hawaii Five-0. It was directed by another new face to Colombo, Ted Post. Post was born in New York on March 31st, 1918, and began his career as an usher in Lowe's Pitkin Theatre. He took an interest in directing and began his television directing career in the early 50s, working on shows such as Perry Mason, The Rifleman, Wagon Train and Rawhide, where he would first work with Clint Eastwood. He would go on to direct Eastwood in Hang 'em High and Magnum Force on the big screen. He also directed previous Columbo guest stars Kim Hunter and James Gregory in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the first sequel to the Charlton Heston film. The episode begins with two Middle Eastern looking men opening a safe and burning some documents from within that safe on the floor. They are Hassan Salah, played by Hector Elizondo, and Rahman Habib, played by Sal Mineo. Elizondo was born in New York on December the 22nd, 1936. He excelled in basketball and baseball and was scouted by the San Francisco Giants and the Pittsburgh Pirates, but ultimately enrolled in City College of New York, intending to become a history teacher. However, in his first year he became a father, and so dropped out to support his family. In 1962 he began studying dance at the Ballet Arts Company and acting at the Stella Adler Theatre Studio. He began his stage career in 1968, gaining success and critical acclaim. He also had several small film and television roles at this time, but most notably was as Gray in The Taking of Pelham 123 in 1974, alongside Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw as part of Shaw's gang. It was shortly after this he appeared in Columbo, and would continue to appear in supporting roles in shows such as Kojak and The Rockford Files, and films like American Gigolo and The Fan, before being cast as Sergeant Dan Bean Delgado on the television spin-off of the film Freebie and the Bean. This would only last one season, and he would continue as a supporting actor, beginning a friendship with Gary Marshall, who would go on to cast him in every one of his films, from Young Doctors in Love onwards. He would even gain a nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his 10-minute appearance in Marshall's Pretty Woman. Outside of his work with Marshall, he would appear in Beverly Hills Cop 3, and as one of the leads on the hospital drama Chicago Hope, which he appeared in all 141 episodes of as Dr. Philip Watters. He would also take over as Adrian Monk's therapist on Monk after the unexpected death of Stanley Camel. He continues to act in film, television and theatre to this day. He is 85. Mineo was born in New York on the 10th of January 1939 and began acting as a child, appearing in theatre in many performances, including playing the young prince alongside Yul Brynner in the King and I on stage. His film breakthrough came in 1955's Rebel Without a Cause, as a teenager obsessed with James Dean's character, which gained him an Oscar nomination as Best Supporting Actor. He would appear with Dean again in Giant and attempted a pop career, succeeding in having a number 9 hit in the States with Start Moving in My Direction. After his film career began to decline, he took smaller roles and moved into television, including this episode of Columbo. His life was sadly cut short when, in 1976, while returning from rehearsals of the play P.S. Your Cat is Dead, he was attacked by a mugger and fatally stabbed. He was just 37. After Salah burns the documents, he closes the safe and plants C4 on it, while Habib graffitis the walls. Salah then calls the head of security while he and Habib trash the room. When the security chief comes in, he goes to the C4-laden safe, and Salah hits him on the back of the head, killing him. Habib removes his outfit and is dressed in typical Western clothes underneath. Habib's job is to call Salah just before he blows the safe, then take off in a car, dressed as one of the protesters that are outside the embassy they're in, while Salah is at the police station organising security arrangements and confirming his alibi. This should mean the enemies of their fictional country of Suari are blamed for the murder and the break-in. At the meeting, Colombo is late, only to discover he isn't supposed to be there at all.
Wait a minute. Captain Colombo was supposed to be here.
And Captain
Got the
August.
names mixed up.
Salah receives Habib's call, and Habib carries out the rest of the plan. The call comes in as Salah is leaving, and Colombo is told he is now part of the task force and has to investigate the murder. At the scene, Colombo explains why he's there and the mistake over him being at the meeting earlier, to which Salah remarks about how much of a coincidence it is. He might have a point. I'm fairly sure this is the writers winking at the audience, and for that reason I think I can let it go. Columbo investigates the scene and is confused by the pile of ashes. He asks how experienced the head of security is, and he's told that he's very experienced. He also finds out that the murder weapon was dropped as the killer fled. He traces the path of the supposed fleeing man and finds out the guard at the rear of the gate tried to fire on the man, but his gun failed, which is incredibly unusual. He also finds out that the head of security took a coffee break at 3 o'clock, but he hadn't drunk any of the coffee on his desk. It would appear he has his usual list of loose ends. He knows something is up. He speaks with Salah and asks him about some of these loose ends, including how the security guard could not have been caught by surprise in the way that he was unless he knew his killer. He knows it must have been an inside job, and the documents were burned before the explosion. He asks Salah where Habib is, as he's the only member of staff not accounted for, and Salah sneakily implies that Habib may have had something to do with it, while appearing to deny that it could have possibly been him. It would appear as if Salah had always planned to implicate Habib. That evening, Habib calls Salah and is confused as to why the newspapers are reporting money was missing. Salah reassures him and arranges his escape from the US. He meets with Habib and pays him, then knocks him out and forces his car off a cliff, but not before putting on his glasses, as his driver's license says that he needs them for driving. It would certainly appear that Salah has thought of everything while committing this murder, but as regular Colombo viewers will know, this likely means he definitely hasn't. Colombo finds out something unusual at the coroner's office, but we don't yet know what it is. He speaks to Salah again and asks why Habib was wearing glasses. Salah explains he needed glasses to see, but Colombo explains,
But as it turns out, sir, he was also wearing these. What are they? Contact lenses.
and hints to us that he knows Salah is involved. He then investigates where Salah was on the night of Habib's death. He leaves to question the protesters and accidentally gets involved in the protest, but he's still unable to discover if Salah left the embassy. At a diplomatic engagement, Colombo manages to meet the king of Suari, but is prevented from questioning him by Salah. Luckily, the king takes a liking to Colombo and appears to be fairly progressive, which presumably is Salah's motive for wanting to depose him, which is what the murder and the break-in plot has all been about. Colombo continues to poke around and feed himself, almost causing a diplomatic incident as he attempts to eat some of the king's food. Salah arrives and Colombo tells him he's certain Habib is a patsy, based on a few things not quite adding up. Salah thinks he's being accused, and Colombo tries to suggest this isn't the case, while also making it pretty clear that it is the case. The next day, Colombo gets chewed out by his superiors as Salah has made a complaint against him. Colombo has very little time for diplomatic matters and tells them,
Well, that's all very well and good, except for one thing.
What is that, Lieutenant?
He's the murderer.
This is a very unusual move for a Colombo episode, as he goes on to telling his bosses what his theory exactly is. We've not really seen this before, but there's a good reason. A representative of the State Department says that due to delicate negotiations and diplomatic immunity, he is not to pursue any of this further, even if Salah did kill the security chief. In a similar vein to A Friend Indeed, Colombo is in a very tricky position, as he can't easily catch the killer and will need to be more cunning than clever, so he agrees to write an apology, but manages to say that he will hand deliver it, so we know he's going to do more than just deliver the letter. As he approaches the embassy, in the tuxedo we saw him wearing the last episode, but this time with his raincoat over the top, he discovers that the protesters are actually in favour of the king as a progressive.
He doesn't realize how reactionary and tyrannical some of his government ministers are.
Colombo eventually makes his way to the king and is nearly stopped by Salah before the king intervenes. When the king goes, Salah tells him he is causing a diplomatic incident, but Colombo tells Salah he's solved the murder. They talk privately, and he tells Salah he knows exactly what happened. He gets Salah angry with what he knows, and as Salah has the guards remove him, he hands Salah his official apology. The next day, Salah escorts the king to his plane back to Suari and plans to make an official complaint to have Colombo fired. But when he returns to the embassy, Colombo is waiting and flags Salah's limo down. He asks for 3 minutes of Salah's time to apologise, but actually is there to congratulate Salah for beating him.
You beat me. That's it. I got beat, plain and simple.
There's a really interesting exchange between the two, where Colombo reveals everything and Salah is overjoyed at how clever and untouchable he is. As he continues to revel in his success, the king appears.
You saw the aircraft depart, huh? But it departed without me at the suggestion of my friend, Lieutenant Colombo.
He will now face Suari justice, which is much harsher than in the US. Salah begs Colombo to arrest him, denouncing his claim to immunity and offering a full confession. Colombo already has the paperwork ready for Salah to sign.
3 copies, if you don't mind.
This is certainly an interesting episode. By its very nature, it could have been quite culturally insensitive, as even though it's a fictional country, Suari is clearly an allegory for a Middle Eastern or North African country. But the Suarians aren't presented as buffoonish or backwards or caricatures, so it only gets close when referring to how barbaric their justice system is, which I think, without specifically referring to a country, is fine. The plot itself, involving diplomatic immunity, now seems a little cliched, may well have done at the time, but the way that that's dealt with gives it a pretty unique spin, and ultimately works really well. A weak point is the initial motive. It's not entirely clear if Salar is doing this purely to steal the 600,000 from the safe, or if he's actually trying to overthrow the king. This is more of a means to an end to get him to murder someone, because, to be honest, he doesn't really need to kill anyone. The murder doesn't really need to take place for his scheme to work. It's fun to see Colombo play the fool and genuinely be out of his depth socially.
Lieutenant, may I present Ambassador and Mrs. Mao Ling, the People's Republic of China.
How do you do?
As well as watch him reveal his hand so early on, so we get to enjoy the laser focus he usually only has in the last 5 minutes of an episode. We're let in on parts of his plan much earlier, while still saving the final gotcha as a surprise. I'm really glad this was a 70-minute episode, as I don't think there's any way this could have been stretched to 95 minutes, but even so, the protesters only seemed to be relevant in order to reveal to Colombo that the king was a progressive leader, so even the 70-minute runtime needed a little bit of padding. All in all, it's a good solid episode with a few flaws, and while I was tempted to give it a higher score, it isn't really a classic for me, so I think it's an average 3 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.